Ever since the beginning of this season of Severance, there is pretty much one thing I have been waiting for. Really one person. We knew we'd see Mark and Helly and Dylan and Irving and all the others, but a character's fate who was left unknown was Miss Casey, the wellness therapist, also known as Gemma, Audi Mark's wife. Deacon Lockman had absolutely entranced me with this off-putting yet innocent and sweet character whose puzzling background only added another layer to the skyscraper of layers that is Severance. And I would unfortunately be left in the dark for 6 whole episodes. Sure, we saw glimpses of Gemma, but they were so minor that it was all the more infuriating. This isn't to say that it was a mistake by the writers, but a couple more weeks and my anger may have been too much to bear. Luckily, my nerves were quelled by Chikhai Bardo, the 7th episode of Season 2, which revolves almost entirely around Gemma, and features the most tour-de-force performance Deacon Lockman has handed to us yet. It more than makes up for all the waiting we've been forced through, and may just be the season's best episode yet. Let's talk about it. Spoilers ahead. In my last review, I ended off by suggesting that the next episode may be an exploration of Mark's mind, something which was actually sort of true, given that the memories we see of Gemma seem to be ones he is recalling or possibly reliving while in a sort of coma after his fall in episode 6. Through this, we are able to see the entire backstory of the two's romance, which is honestly even more depressing than I thought it would be. There's certainly sweet aspects to the moments we see, but I had expected this story to be one that was mostly innocent until it was cut off by tragedy. Turns out, that isn't really the case. Mark begins the sequence at the most positive point we've ever seen him. The two first meet volunteering for a blood drive, an incredibly selfless and respectable act, yet with time and pain, Mark becomes a bit of a homebody, enough that it is hard to believe that the later version of him would go through with something like this. Gemma experiences a miscarriage after having hidden her pregnancy from Mark, and the two spend lots of time afterwards trying for a baby, but they find themselves unable to reproduce the first time, even once more. Mark, someone who's always been a bit of a realist, begins to clash with Gemma's hopeful and spiritual perseverance, and while they love each other until the end, they find themselves growing apart. This results in Gemma likely taking extreme measures that result in her death, in quotes, though this is something that we never see. Given the recap's inclusion of Devon's woman crush from Season 1, I would guess that she chose to sever herself to attend some Lumen retreat that may have been able to help her have the baby without realizing their cruel intentions. At that point, they would have moved her to a secure location and began using her as essentially a test subject. This plotline is depressing to the fullest extent, but what really makes it so fantastic is how it is visually communicated in such an artsy fashion. There are a couple key moments, technically, that I absolutely adored, which I will run through now. The absolute centerpiece of the episode, in my opinion, is the fantastically edited montage which basically runs through the entire happy and innocent portion of Mark and Gemma's relationship. We see quick flashes of their living arrangements shifting with these fantastic warm lights shining in through the windows. Intercut are splices of home video-like shots, acted with such grace by Adam Scott and Deacon Lockman, truly appearing as if this is only a flash of a larger life. Everything is so sharp and so beautiful, with a purposeful glow to it and a swaying, romantic French backing track. It truly is one of the most wonderful and personal sequences the series has ever portrayed. I would also give credit to the sound team for the incredible work on the short exchange between Devon and Gemma concerning the latter's pregnancy, a personal connection shared between these two women. Mark and Rickon continue their conversation, voices drowned out, as Devon and Gemma each are given these close-up shots, Devon's of realization and Gemma's of simultaneous excitement and embarrassment. If I could criticize this flashback for anything, it is neglecting the relationship between this quartet a bit, given that this was the only scene we see of them, despite Devon proclaiming how much of a family they were in Season 1, but nonetheless, I can say that this exchange says 1,000 words. I'll keep throwing compliments at Jen Tulloch in a bit, but I also want to compliment the single shot which is getting the most talk of any in the entire episode, being the one in which Mark realizes his wife is gone. Adam Scott absolutely blows me away in this scene, portraying it in a way very specific to Mark. He doesn't exactly seem depressed, he doesn't break out in tears right away. It's a mix of shock and immediate disassociation. It's as if he leaves his body at this realization, something which he would go on to do just a bit later. Plus, the shot which covers his eyes in shadow introduces multiple new forms of genius. Firstly, I have to compliment Adam Scott yet again for embracing the challenge of communicating such emotion without the tool of the eyes, only being able to utilize the lower half of his face despite how big of a moment this is supposed to be for his character. Obviously, he still nails it, because the man is just like that. But additionally, this very shot shows Mark split in half after Gemma's death, a very representation of the severance procedure he would go on to experience. Only 50% of his face can be seen. It's unbelievable what Jessica Lee Gagne, director of this episode and consistent cinematographer for the show, can manage with a single frame. But okay, let's talk about the rest, because there's certainly more to go through. While we see the past of Mark and Gemma, we are also treated to a visual of Gemma's current life, as she is, of course, alive. Here we learn that she is not being kept in her any state forever, something which may have been actually better treatment than what is actually happening, which is her having been kept prisoner in a room that looks like a psych ward with only 2 apathetic doctors as company. We see Lumen as conducting bizarre experiments on Gemma, ignoring her pleas to see her family, and instead tossing her into dozens of different rooms, each of which trigger a different version of her innie. This is something we've never seen before, which leads me to believe that this is the test Lumen is undergoing with her as the subject: multiple chips and multiple versions. Each Gemma that enters a room is a different Gemma, meaning that for each innie, that one room is their entire life. Deacon Lockman was never given the chance to transition between innie and outie before, and we see here that she absolutely fucking rules at it. Miss Casey always had a sort of childish nature to her, where she didn't really understand social cues, but was clearly trying her best, and each innie that we get the chance to see in each room is just the same to an even higher degree. These Gemmas are subservient and simple-minded, though this is no fault of their own. These are people who have each been conditioned to repeat one activity, no matter how they tire of it. To each separate Gemma, there is one task to complete, and no reason not to do it. After all, if she keeps doing what they say, maybe they'll let her see the outside world. But they never will. Outie Gemma isn't so complacent, though, as she whacks Robbie Benson Doctor over the head with a chair and attempts her escape in yet another scene that shows how good the Severance team would be as horror directors. Nonetheless, as soon as she makes her way into the elevator, we are treated to our first glimpse of the actual Miss Casey, as she is given a rushed excuse by Milchick and turned right back around. Gemma's story ends as she cries helplessly, having been voluntarily returned to solitary confinement, despite not doing a single thing wrong. If you had any sympathy for Lumen left, it's gone by now. As I said, Deacon Lockman gives a tour de force performance here, as she is essentially playing a different character in nearly every scene, and doesn't struggle once to adjust. Gemma's personality differs heavily from her innies, and yet both feel like effortless and fitting performances. And last of all, let's very quickly touch on the Devon plotline. After Mark's collapse, Devon, being the coolest human being on the planet, refuses to leave his side for a second. Here we begin to see the true Ragabi as she bounces off of the more reasonable Devon in an extremely hostile way. It seems as if Ragabi has been on the run so long that she has forgotten what societal norms are, as she asks a woman to just trust her to control her brother's mind and body, despite him collapsing and foaming at the mouth hours earlier. Then, in a shocking turn of events, Ragabi abandons Mark with Devon once she no longer listens to her commands. I find this to be a very intelligent move from the writers, crafting Ragabi to almost be just as hateable as Lumen for her blatant disregard of her patient's safety. Most of the people fighting Lumen are the ones we are meant to root for and connect to, but this woman is a complete and utter piece of shit despite her rebellious nature and hatred of our big bad. We, as the audience, always knew Ragabi kind of had a screw loose, and yet I myself was surprised that she was willing to go this far simply for self-preservation, abandoning her most promising subject yet at the drop of a hat. Mark never really meant anything to her, and she will sacrifice anyone to get the heads of the Lumen board on her doorstep. Karen Aldridge is the best she's ever been here, even if she is kind of overshadowed by Jen Tulloch playing up the panicked sibling in such an emotional and likable fashion. Devon has been the show's unsung hero for so long, and watching her have to deal with the revelation of Gemma's survival, falling to her knees in tears, only to get right back up and at her brother's side, really has made me appreciate her even more. The moment in which Mark finally wakes up, she speaks to him softly and quietly, clearly exhausted, but not wanting to frighten him in such a confusing time. And then he looks at her like he doesn't even know her, and the episode ends with a shot of Gemma's eyes. My heart is shattered. Severance is just such a diverse and multifaceted show. Horror, romance, thrills, drama, you name it, they got it. I've been glad to see the series get its well-deserved fame, it being plastered all over ads and videos. I cannot name all the people I have seen making Severance references in their videos, and each time it catches me off guard because this show feels like it should be a special little gem. The David Lynch inspiration has never been clearer in moments like the dentist scene with Gemma's close-up mouth, or the sequence depicting quick, frightening flashes through the Lumen hallways, and that man has always been synonymous with the term cult audience. I would expect a small yet devoted fanbase, but instead we're seeing widespread recognition, and let's be honest, that's a miracle. You're seeing celebrities get involved like Keanu Reeves and John Noble, fans like Kristen Bell, SZA, and Jon Stewart. Severance is a worldwide phenomenon, and you can't be missing out. 9 out of 10. No, 9.5 out of 10. It's a delightful little tragedy. Bye now.